Does it feel good to see the building full of people? How many of you are encouraged when you see that? I want you to know when you're not here, we feel that. We experience that. Just like we experience it and we feel it when you're here. And if you want to invite some friends, we do have a few seats still available. So don't feel shy in doing that. Appreciate everybody being here. Appreciate this church every week. This is family and this is home. And Marty and I have asked ourselves, well, if I happen to retire or something, where would we go to church? And I said, man, I don't know. I'm not sure anybody else would have me. You know, but this is home. And we appreciate you guys very much. Let's do some Bible time together. Let's do our confession. We confess our faith together as Christians. Join me in doing that. I'm a child of God. I am saved by grace. I live each day by faith. And I'm ready to hear God's word. Let's listen to God's word for a minute. Thank you for standing. We always stand when God's word is read because it deserves our respect. Let me step down here and share with you. 1 Samuel 21. How to invite disaster in your life. But David kept thinking to himself, someday Saul is going to get me. Best thing I can do is escape to the Philistines. Then Saul will stop hunting for me in Israelite territory and I'll finally be safe. So David took his 600 men, went over and joined Achish, the son of Maoch, the king of Gath. David and his men and their families settled there with Achish at Gath. David brought his 2 wives along with him, Ahinoam from Jezreel and Abigail, Nabal's widow from Carmel. Word soon reached Saul that David had fled to Gath, so he stopped hunting for him. One day David said to Achish, if it's all right with you, we'd rather live in one of the country towns instead of here in the royal city. So Achish gave him the town of Ziklag, which still belongs to the kings of Judah to this day. And they lived there among the Philistines for 1 year and 4 months. David and his men spent their time raiding the Geshurites, the Girzites, the Amalekites, people who had lived near Shur toward the land of Egypt since ancient times. David did not leave one person alive in the villages he attacked. He took the sheep, goats, cattle, donkeys, camels, and clothing before returning home to see King Achish. Where'd you make your raid today? Achish would ask. Listen to how he fudges a little bit. David would reply, against the south of Judah, the Jerahmeelites and the Kenites. It's a lie, by the way. No one was left alive to come to Gath and tell where he had really been. This happened again and again while he was living among the Philistines. Achish believed David and thought to himself, well, by now the people of Israel must hate him bitterly. Now he may have to stay here and serve me forever. May God bless his word, as people said. Boy, did you get all that cock and bull at the end of that story? It's one of the biggest shovels I've ever seen. Amazing how things change when we start compromising, isn't it? You give a little and then you give a lot. Sin is a hard taskmaster. I want to talk to you a little bit this morning from the life of David on how to invite disaster in your life. My feeling is this, that there is no greater disaster in life than to leave your faith. It's the worst thing you can do. Because to leave your faith, you have to leave your God, and to leave your God, you have to leave the promises. That's a bad place to be. Many of us have done that at one time or another. Let's not joke about it. I mean, many of us at one time or another have been out there instead of in here. We know the feeling. It's not a happy place. You stop and you think to yourself, how did I get here? What I'd like to do is suggest some things to you that might prevent that from happening. The goal is that you not get there. You know, I don't think the goal of the prodigal son was ever to end up in a pigsty eating slop. But that's where he ended up, wasn't it? So let's think about that for a few minutes this morning as we look at the life of David. At one time or another in everybody's life, you're going to find yourself in the pits. Ever been in the pits? Stinks, doesn't it? Yuck, yuck, yuck. Who wants to be in the pits? And yet, we've all been there. Little kids get in the pits. Teenagers get in the pits. Young adults get in the pits. Old adults get in the pits. And everybody in between. It's just something that happens every now and then. There's nothing wrong with that. We're emotional beings. We go through a life that is like a roller coaster. All of us do. All of us have times in our lives when things are really great. All of us have times in our lives when all the wheels come off the wagon. And we find ourselves dragging the wagon through life instead of pulling it along or maybe even getting in it and riding a little bit. We find times in life, for whatever reasons, and there are different reasons, but we find ourselves at times when we're just rock bottom. We hit a low point. We wonder why we even try to go on. We don't care. Nobody else cares. God doesn't love us. We just get to those times. And in our story today, we find David at one of those times, which amazes me given what God has just done for him. Has God not delivered him? Has God not blessed him? Has God not given him the opportunity to even take out the king? And he said that he wouldn't do it because he had faith in God. And then he turns right around and blows it. Which reminds us that none of us are very far from being on the wrong side of that situation. Look at me. Look at this with me for a minute. These are great times of spiritual danger. When you hit low points in life, this is when your faith gets rocked. This is when you start asking questions. Questions you would never ask any other time. This is when you start looking around for other options. This is the time when many times when we hit a low spot or a hard spot in life, we quit going to church. Worst thing you can do. But we do it, don't we? We do it. And that's just, hey, it's what we do. It's what we do. Doesn't make sense. From a logical standpoint, it doesn't make sense. But let me tell you a little secret. When you're in the pits, you don't look at things logically. You don't reason through things and say, let me weigh the will of God in my life. I don't remember, I saw a quote somewhere that said, the worse our lives get, the harder we run. You know, the worse things get in life, the faster you run, hoping that running fast somewhere will get it all worked out. And that doesn't necessarily happen. So it's a time of spiritual danger. Most of the times when you have a low point in life, you're at a fork in the road. And you got to make a decision. Am I going to go this way or am I going to go this way? And the decision you make may have eternal consequences. So let's look at that. I want you to look at this picture of a man in spiritual decline. This blows my mind. God has just delivered David twice from the hands of Saul. David even says as much. David says, the Lord has delivered me. Samuel told him, you will be the king. Jonathan told him, someday, my friend, you will be the next king. Saul even told him after he delivered Saul and refused to take his life, Saul says, now I truly realize you will be the king one day. Everything points to the fact that God has got him taken care of. God's covering him. God's going to move his life in the right direction. And it's at this point that Saul continues his pursuit, and finally David just hits rock bottom. And he just disregards everything that's happened, everything that's said, all the blessings of God, all the promises of God. He just disregards them and does something crazy. Does something that makes no sense at all, especially for him. There are four things that kind of characterize what David does during this time. Number one, he begins to focus only on the horizontal. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, he deals God out of the equation, doesn't he? He looks at Saul. He looks at his men. He looks at his pain. He looks at his fatigue. He looks at his circumstances, which don't seem good. He looks at all the problems around him, and that's all he sees. We call that in psychology catastrophic thinking. Many times when things go wrong in life, all we can think about is the worst thing that could happen. What's the worst thing that could happen? And then that's what we assume is going to happen. You know, listen, I'm not going to lie to you. I've sat in my bed the last few nights or the last couple of weeks and thought about to myself what it would feel like, how I would function if I were completely paralyzed on one side. I'm going to tell you something, friends. That's a sobering thought. The day I had my stroke, I got up to get ready to go to the hospital. I could not fasten my pants. I could not button my shirt because this hand wouldn't respond. I would say to the fingers, move, dadgummit, and they'd say, don't want to. Move. Nope, not going anywhere. You move. You know, you want me to move, you move me. And I'd move it, and it'd go right back to the way it was. That's a scary thought. That's not nearly as scary as some of you have been through, and I understand that. But it's not a pleasant thought. And you start having all these haunting ideas of what's going to happen, and, you know, you start going through worst-case scenario. In fact, what's the first thing you ask the doctor when you get a diagnosis of something? Well, what's the worst thing that could happen? Why do we ask that question first? Because that's the way we are. What's the worst thing that could happen? So David engages in that. I want you to look at the language of the passage. But David, look at the words. David kept thinking to himself. That's self-talk. That's self-talk. That is horizontal thinking. When I spend all my time talking to me, I'm not spending any of my time talking to him. I'm assuming that he doesn't have anything to do with it. He doesn't care about it. He's not going to act in it. I've got to work this out by myself. By the way, that's another thing when you hit the bottom is you think the only person that can get you out of this is yourself. Is that not true? We feel all by ourselves. We feel isolated. We're all alone. We're the only ones that can do it. How am I going to get out of this? And the answer is you're not. Not by yourself. Very seldom have any of us ever gotten out of a low spot in life by ourselves. God didn't make us that way. So he says, well, maybe Saul's going to forget about me. The best thing I can do is escape to the Philistines. Hadn't he tried that once? Old habits. We fall back on the same dumb habits that didn't work before. But what are you going to do? It's all you got. You're not getting advice from anybody else. You're not listening to anybody else. You're just self-fixing the whole thing. And so you tend to go back to what you've done before, and it didn't work before. It's why you're where you are now. And yet, here we go. We're going to recycle. Some things don't need to be recycled. Some things need to be put in a landfill. And that's one of them. Now, another thing that David quit doing was thinking about consequences. Hey, every decision you make has consequences. And by the way, not only for you. One of the biggest concerns that we never think about in situations like this, when we do catastrophic thinking, is collateral damage. Our family, our friends, our church family, those that look to us, those that love us, those that have prayed with us and for us, those who care about us. Even strangers that are just standing out there kind of watching from a distance to see what happens. We don't think about the consequences. Now somebody says, how do you get that? I want you to look at the next two verses. So David does what? Where's he going? He's going to the Philistines, right? By the way, is there anybody that are more hated enemies of Israel and more anti-God than the Philistines? No. You hate the Philistines. You know? So what does he do? He says, maybe I should go down to the Philistines for protection. What does he do? He takes his 600 men and take them with him. And then look at the next statement. David and his men, and here's the sobering thought, and their families settled in the land of the Philistines. Now, what are they going to expose their children to? Paganism. They're going to expose their children to ungodly religion, to idolatry, to immorality, to an antagonistic attitude toward the people of God. He is dumping his entire military force and their families into an ungodly environment. Remember Lot? Abraham went to Egypt, took his family with him, and almost betrayed his wife. Lot took a higher course, didn't he? He went and settled in the city's area around Sodom and Gomorrah. Remember those names? He settled there. Eventually, he moved into one of the cities there. And after that, what does it say? Have you ever read that passage? He became one of the leading elders of that city. He would sit in the gate and make decisions. Boy, you talk about buying in, that's collateral damage. And he ended up losing his wife. And in a sense, morally, he also lost his 2 daughters because they engaged in a horribly immoral activity with him after he escaped from Sodom and Gomorrah. Why? Because that's the culture they grew up in. It was okay to them. Collateral damage. What's going to happen? You know, we always say to ourselves, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? Another thought might be, if I choose this course of life, what's the worst thing that could happen? My family could lose their souls. My children could lose their souls. I could lose my soul. Is that really? Now, you talk about catastrophic thinking. That's about as catastrophic as you can get. The next thing he does is David begins flirting with the enemy. And by the way, that's how the spiral into sin happens. Most people don't just say, I'm walking out today and I'm going to be a full-blown hedonistic sinner tomorrow morning. I'm going to get up, first thing I'm going to do is take drugs and get drunk. And then I'm going to go out and I'm going to look for a good man to have time with or a woman to have time with. And then I'm going to cheat my neighbors and I'm just going to go full-blown and do all of that. We don't do that. What do? George, have you ever fished? You fish for crappie, haven't you? Now, crappie don't usually just grab the hook and run, do they? You go fishing for crappie, you put that hook in the water with, I like to use the old-fashioned cane poles with the little corks. And what you do is you put that out and it's floating around out there, and all of a sudden you'll see that cork go like that. If you grab it, then you're going to end up with an empty hook. You're going to jerk the minnow off, and the fish gets a free meal, and you get an empty hook, and you get to use another minnow. You got to let him wait. Pull it. Pull it a couple of times. And then you'll see, it's fun to watch them. What they'll do is they'll start easing. You'll see that little cork, you start easing under, and it'll pop back up. You just sit there and wait. When you see it ease all the way under, you pop it. You got your big fat fish. That's the way they do it. They mess with you. That's the way we dabble in sin. We nibble. We nibble 2 or 3 times. Pull it under just a little bit, see how it feels. And then before you know it, Satan is, boom, he's got you. That's the way sin works. Satan takes us from God the way you cook a frog. You know how you cook a frog, don't you? How many of you know how to cook a frog? You take a frog and you put him in a big pot of water at room temperature and you turn it up 3 degrees a minute. And before you know it, you got frog legs. And the frog didn't even realize he was getting cooked. And I'll tell you, I know a lot of people in life that have ended up cooked by Satan didn't realize they was getting cooked at all. What you do, folks, is you don't get in the pot. Word soon reached Saul that David had fled to Gath, so he stopped hunting for him. One day David said to the king, if it's all right with you, I'd rather live in one of the country towns. I want to have my own little place. So Achish gave him the town of Ziklag, and that became their home in the territory of the enemy. Now, right now, they're not doing anything except they're just living in the area. They're camped out around the edges. They're kind of hanging out with them. For a year and 3 months they hang out. But eventually David ends up, what is David? He's a warlord. What's he got? A military force. What do kings like to have? Military forces. So eventually David ends up serving the enemy. Not just living with the enemy and flirting with the enemy. Eventually you swallow the hook. And that's what happens here. Look at this. David and his men spent their time raiding. Now, we saw the end of that story. They raided all these tribes in the deep south of Israel. They didn't touch the Israelites. They didn't touch the Israelites because that's their people, right? They raided the other tribes around there, and they wiped everybody out so that there were no witnesses. Why? Because when David came home and Achish says, well, where you been fighting? Oh, I've been fighting in the south of Judah. No, you haven't. You've been fighting in the south and avoiding Judah. But the fun thing about a lie is if a person decides to think a certain thing, hey, it's not my fault. He's the one that made the assumption. He's dumb. He assumed when David said he's fighting in the south, that means he was fighting the southern borders of Israel. So the king says, hey, this is my boy right here. I like this guy, man. He goes down, he puts a whipping on the Israelites. I don't even have to expend my own men. What a great guy to have around. But David is doing his bidding, isn't he? He's working for the king of the Philistines. Now, let's pursue this story on another chapter or two. It kind of goes on. Over in chapter 29, the story picks up. But here it gives me a different view of this. We've seen what he does. We've seen what David does. He thinks horizontally. He forgets the consequences. He doesn't care. He flirts with the enemy. Now he's working for the enemy. Okay, what happens to David in this process? Because that's what it's the same thing that happens to us in our process of getting drawn away from God. Look at what happens to him. Number one, you forget who you really are. I'm a child of the King. I'm saved by the grace of God. I'm a child of God. I'm saved by grace. I live each day by faith. Amen? That's what we say. But when you start drifting away, you forget those phrases real quick. You forget that you're a child of God. I mean, I'm still a child of God. I'm sure God will understand. No. Let me tell you a little secret. God doesn't understand. When you put God in a second position in your life, God does not understand. He is a jealous God. He doesn't like it. That's human rationalization. That's horizontal thinking. Oh, God will No, God won't understand. You've betrayed him. You are camping with the enemy. You are doing the work of the enemy. Choose ye this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of the land around you or whether the God of heaven. You've got to make a choice. Jesus says, no man can serve two masters. He'll either love one and hate the other or cling to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon, or you cannot serve God and this world as well. It doesn't work. You forget who you are. Achish finally summoned David and said to him, I swear by the Lord, you've been the most trustworthy guy I've ever seen. What an indictment. What a horrible thing for this man is the future king of Israel, And the enemy of Israel says, man, you're the greatest guy I ever met. I love you. You're my buddy. Come on down here, ride my chariot with me. I like you. Man, if there's a guy I can count on to do my bidding, you're the one. I think you should go with me into battle. Now, he says, I've never found a flaw with you from the day you arrived until today. The other Philistine rulers wouldn't let him go. You know, because they said, hey, the guy's an Israelite. Wants to keep him right in the middle of battle from turning his troops around and coming at you. But Achish says to him, hey, you're a good boy. You've done everything I've asked you to do. You just licking my shoes and doing everything I say. That tells you something. David has forgotten who he is. He's doing the bidding of the enemies of Israel while laying claim in the future to being the king of Israel. He's already fought these people. Now he's fighting for them. What's wrong with this picture? Because what happens is your loyalties begin to shift. And when you see people drifting away from the Lord in the church today, you see loyalty shifting, don't you? Other things are more important. Other people are more important. Other activities are more important. It doesn't happen all at once, does it? But gradually, it's easier and easier to camp on the other side of the river. Notice this. David says, what have I done to... They don't want him to go into battle. What have I done to deserve this treatment, he demanded. What have you ever found in... Now listen to his language. What have you ever found in your servant that I can't go and fight? Listen, the enemies... Who are the enemies? The Israelites. That I can't go and fight the enemies of my Lord the King. Talk about selling out. Loyalties have completely turned upside down here, haven't they? And that happens to us if we're not careful. You forget who you serve. You forget who you answer to. You forget who's supposed to be sitting on the throne of your life. And eventually, you find yourself broken and isolated because once you withdraw from God, God withdraws from you. If you go run your own show, you ever done that with one of your kids? They know everything, right? So you say, shoot, fire, go get it, man. Make it happen, Captain. And then when they finally come back, kind of sheepishly admit they messed up, what do you say? Well, we shouldn't, but we do, don't we? Told you so. Now, that's the difference between us and God. God never looks at us and laughs at us and says, I told you so, stupid. Now you're going to listen? God doesn't say that. But when life's big issues are at stake, God doesn't have to say it. You figure, you know, the prodigal son realized as he sat in the pigsty in the mud and the stink and ate the slop that he dug out of the mud on the ground. Nobody had to say, you messed up, stupid. You should have known better. I told you so. He figured it out on his own, didn't he? Because sin has a humiliating effect on a person. It strips your dignity and turns you into a slave. And so the prodigal son didn't go home and see what would happen. He made the decision right then and there, hey, at least in my father's house the slaves eat well. I get a better meal as a slave. And so he decided then he would not go home and say, well, Daddy, boy's back. What's going to happen now? Let's have a party. He went back home and said, Daddy, I'm nothing. I don't deserve to be your son. Would you make me your slave? I would live better as your slave than I'm living on my own. You know, look, this is a telling story. I want you to look at this. Remember how they lived in Ziklag? They got their own little town there, David and all his soldiers. They populated this little town of Ziklag. 3 days later, when David and his men arrived home, they found that the Amalekites, David had been whacking on the Amalekites, okay? So you know in the ancient world, you get payback. By the way, you flirt with sin, you get payback. The wages of sin is death. So the Amalekites come, and they'd made a raid and hit the city of Ziklag and crushed the city and burned it to the ground and carried off the women and children. Collateral damage. Now it took, what, 2 or 3 years of this dallying with the enemy. But the damage will be there. They'd carried off the women and children and everyone else without killing anyone. David and his men saw the ruins, realized what had happened to their families. What did they do? They wept until they could weep. Now, have you ever cried so hard that you can't cry anymore? I mean, you cry and you sob, but you've run out of juice. You ever juiced out crying? We all have that experience, don't we, sometimes? It just hurts so bad and you just can't. You just have nothing left to give. And at that point, you're weak and you're tired and you're empty and you're broken. And you've only got one direction to go in. That's up, because you can't go any further down. But I want you to look at the last of this. This is not the end of the collateral damage. Who's the leader? David. Who made the decision at the fork in the road? Who thought horizontally? Who didn't consider the consequences? Who led them into the sin? Now look what happens. David was now in great danger because all his men were very bitter about losing their families, and they began to talk of stoning him. Even his own people are ready to sell him out. They're done with him. He has shown himself to be unreliable, has cost them their families. Somebody's got to pay. The thing is, hopefully, like the prodigal son, and I might add, like David in this story, you eventually realize where you are and where you need to be. I think one of the things that makes David a man after God's own heart is not that he lived a perfect life, but that he always knew where home was. Okay? He always knew where Daddy's house was. And like some dumb kid, you go out and mess everything up, and when all else fails, you go home to Daddy. Because you know that Daddy's going to take care of you. Because God's going to take care of you. And you've got to believe that. I want you to look at this great statement in chapter 30, verse 6. This is after all this mess is blown up. David's not only running from Saul, but now he's running from his own men. Look what it says. But David found strength in the Lord his God. There's your story. David found strength in the Lord. He's trusted in his 600 men. He's trusted in his wits. He's trusted in the Philistines. Now he realizes only shot he's got is to trust in God. He's come back home, hasn't he? Or at least he's on the way back. Which leads me to 2 thoughts. Number 1, to survive, you need to build a strong foundation. You got to build your faith. You got to develop your faith. You got to strengthen your faith while things are going well. Because I'm going to tell you a little secret, and you know this and I know this as well. When things blow up in your face, you don't care about strengthening your faith then. You don't have the energy to do that. You don't have the resources to do that then. The resources have to be in place beforehand. Before the hurricane hits, you need to have warehouses in that region stacked with supplies so that the minute the storm passes, you can start moving those supplies in. You can't wait until the area is destroyed and then say, well, we got a warehouse up in Seattle. If you'll give us 6 weeks, we can get that stuff down here. In the crises of life, you don't always have 6 weeks to bring in supplies. You need something you can open the door and feed on right then. And that's where you got to build your foundation. I would remind you of what Jesus says about wise and foolish people and about houses that stand and houses that collapse and how that it's all about foundations. You build your house, and from the bedrock up, it's not going anywhere. You build your house on the sand. Have you ever built a sand castle on the beach? What happens during high tide? Tell me, Haley. What happens during high tide when the water comes in? It goes away, doesn't it? It's what your life's going to do if you don't have a solid foundation. The second thing is to survive, you need godly support. You're not going to make it on your own. None of us are going to make it on our own. We really need each other. That's why God established what we call the church. The body of Christ, the family of God. It's why God has us in a family. Is because he expects us to have each other's back, to look out for each other. Notice what the writer of Hebrews says. Let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm. How do you do that? Hold tightly to the hope you affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some do, but encourage one another, and especially as you see the day of the Lord drawing near. Now, we've heard that in churches of Christ. That's a command. You're going to go to hell if you don't go to church. Well, that's probably true, but not because of this command. What this command says is, hey, you need somebody to cover your back. A trip across the desert's a lot more enjoyable when you got a partner walking with you. Two people reasoning together can make better sense out of things than one person thinking by themselves. Especially when you surround yourself with godly people. You build relationships and you learn to trust them. And then you come to them in times of need and say, help guide me. I feel like I have no rudder right now. Can I tie my rowboat to your rowboat, at least for a little while, so that I don't drift away? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. If an engine quits on a boat, they go out with another boat and they rig them together and one takes the other in. It might never happen, but it might happen numerous times. The point is, whatever you need. That's what we're supposed to be doing as church. That's what we are. It's who we are. I love the Cumberland Heights. Have you seen the Cumberland Heights advertisements on TV about the rehab center? I've thought to myself, we ought to put our label on that and play it for hours. Those are awesome commercials, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's what we do. That's what we do. That's who we are. Be careful. You're always in a minefield. You walk outside these doors, it's nice and safe. We can get in here and we can raise our hands and close our eyes and sing praise and feel spiritual and all of that. You walk out that door, you're walking into a minefield. You're walking into the front lines of the battle, and Satan is always there. Just the first thing goes out the front door. After you shake my hand and say, that was another sermon today, you walk about 5 more steps and Satan says, welcome home. It's good to see you. Now let's go to work. And Achish, the king of the Philistines, starts giving you orders on where to take your troops. If you're not a Christian, you need to become a Christian. Because life is precious and salvation is the only thing that matters when the bottom line is drawn. If you're a Christian, you need encouragement. Man, we want to give that to you. If you want prayer, we'll give it to you. That's the least we can do. That's a blessing for us. If you need encouragement, find somebody, pull them aside and say, hey, walk with me. I need some help. While we stand and sing.